Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Tiffany Garcia, and I'm a librarian here at the San Jose Public Library. Tonight, we have a special program in honor of St. Patrick's Day, which is coming up on Thursday, March 17th. And the reason we are doing this program is because of San Jose's Sister City Program with Dublin, Ireland, and because of California's rich history in Irish immigration. And we have partnered with many speakers, and we will hopefully bring you some more information that you may have not known about California's rich Irish history. So without further ado, I'll pass the spotlight on to Robert, the consul for Ireland in San Francisco. Thank you so much.
Hey, how's it going? Thank you very much for Tiffany, for passing it on. And I want to begin by thanking the San Jose Public Library, the UICC, and of course our good friends at AmeriCeltic for organising this event this evening. Even an illustrious panel after me this evening with Tim and Tom and so many good great speakers. So it's going to be a fantastic show. And because at the outset, I just want to wish everybody a happy St. Patrick's Day. This is Irish American Heritage Month. This is our special month of the year. So Lá Féile Pódraig honey of happy St. Patrick's Day to you all. Before I get in, I think this year for St. Patrick's Day and our special month of celebrations and festivities as we emerge from the pandemic, but it is very much for us Irish, I think for certainly Europeans in general, but also the whole Western world, seeing the scenes in Ukraine just creates such an incredible sense of sorrow and sadness. And, you know, this is an aggression by Russia, which we see as unjustified, as immoral, as illegal. And I want to take this opportunity just to express our solidarity with Ukraine. We're doing so politically, we're doing so through financial support in Ireland, and also through welcoming Ukrainians to Ireland to live and work here for a period of up to 3 years, according to the EU decision today. I think it's important that we do that. We have that solidarity with them, but the scenes are quite frankly heartbreaking in Europe. So to tonight's talk, I mean, I came here. I have a history degree, and when I came here, I find your history so interesting here because everything is so new. In Ireland, we look at a house that's built in the 1890s and go, that's a new build. Where in California, some of the most ancient properties you have go back to them. So when I first came here, I was maybe trying to understand how the history here, but the more I've scratched the surface in California, the more I've come to the conclusion that there is possibly nowhere in the world outside of the island of Ireland where the Irish have made a more formative impact than in the state of California. And just maybe it is to my mind a pure accident of history. It goes back to the fact that our great national tragedy, our famine in 1847, essentially happens at the same time as the gold rush. So at one moment where you have an enormous outflow of human capital from Ireland, 1.5 million people in a 3 to 4 year period, followed by massive chain migration over the next 70 to 80 years. But at that moment in the 1840s, early 1850s, we were pushing out people. California was sucking people in. And there's a great sign up in Sacramento, one of the buildings, that says, "Bring me the men to match my mountains." And I often think to myself, for those Irish who hit the East Coast, for those Irish who typically had capital, who were those Irish who were looking for experience, who were trying to escape some of the prejudices that were on, and the discrimination that they experienced on the East Coast. The promise of California and the possibilities that California offered must have been an enormous temptation, and they came in enormous numbers. I think the figure that blows my mind every time I hear it is 1881 census. A third of everyone in the city and county of San Francisco is identifiably Irish or of Irish descent. And even in figures from 1919 from the records of teachers, lay teachers in San Francisco, fully half of all lay teachers are identifiably Irish or of Irish descent, and they're just kind of whispers in the wind that tell a tale of just how many Irish came here and how they made here their home. And I think to speak about the Irish in California, suggests that it's their unitary group, and of course they really aren't, because if you have that number of people coming from anywhere in the world, you always get finding people in different sides of the conversation. And I think here you think labor and business, for example. The Irish were once great entrepreneurs, people like John Sullivan, who established the Hibernian Bank, the first state chartered bank in California. You have, of course, the Silver Kings, 3 of whom were Irish born. Then the other side, the labor movement, you have people like P.H. McHenry, who ultimately became mayor of San Francisco. The labor movement became a hugely important part of the Irish community, because it was a way for the Irish to climb the social totem pole, to establish a decent life for themselves. And these are people who, within living memory, or certainly in living memory of their parents during that formative period in the first kind of 70 years of after the famine, after the gold rush, who had escaped famine, who had quite probably fought in a civil war. And there wasn't their own civil war; it was the American Civil War. Had died in enormous numbers at that as well. Many of them had gone on to also work on the railroads, and certainly played a huge role in the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. Probably one of the greatest engineering feats of the 19th century. They lived very difficult lives, and labor union membership was a way for them to secure themselves in what had been an incredibly fragile existence in the years before then. I think also of the Irish in built infrastructure. I mean, I think I always say that between O'Shaughnessy, O'Farrell, and Mulholland, there wouldn't be a glass of water to be drunk in the city of California if it wasn't for Irish engineers. And of course, this city in San Francisco, where I am now, O'Farrell was, of course, Jasper O'Farrell was, of course, a Trinity College graduate who laid out the city. We've him to blame. And then, of course, in the area of politics, I mean, this is a state where the Irish naturally, just by virtue of their numbers, took a role in leadership. And you've got people like McCoppin, who was, of course, made mayor in 1867, first Irish-born mayor of any major city in America. Someone like John Downey, who became governor of California in the 1880s, one of only 2 foreign-born governors ever to lead this great state. No prizes for who the other one is. But also in the big social campaigns, people like Kate Kennedy, a Meath native teacher who fought for equal pay for equal work for women, won a Supreme Court case that established that principle in California law. Also campaigned for and established the principle of security of tenure for teachers. And of course, the Irish play a very important role in the nativist movement and the birth of that movement. You see a lot of key Irish-born people in that. And I think to understand that movement as well, I think you almost also have to look back at that great period of fragility that those Irish people who had experienced in the post famine period. But I think if there's one area where you probably can think of the Irish community, as being one community, a homogenous group in any way, it's as it relates to Irish freedom. And if you go back, there are 2 visits which I think are just really, really important. One is the visit by then Uachtaráin Conradh na Gaeilge, the president of Conradh na Gaeilge, the Irish-speaking language organization, Irish cultural organization in Ireland, Douglas Hyde, who visits here in 1906. And Hyde ultimately goes on to be president of Ireland in the 1930s. And then the other is, 1940s, 40s, 50s and 40s. And then the other, of course, is the visit by Eamon de Valera in 1919, when he comes here as the self-proclaimed president of the Irish Republic, or self-described president of the Irish Republic. He was the popular leader of the Irish freedom movement. And the reaction to those visits is both enormous. I mean, for Hyde, he leaves California with $30,000. It's an enormous amount of money. It essentially sustains the Irish language movement in Ireland, which is, I mean, everyone who knows about our revolutionary period knows that cultural awakening was so important, underpinning our movement towards independence and freedom. And Eamon de Valera's visit in 19 ultimately leads to California contributing over $2 million to bond buying for a new Irish Republic. That financial support is key in underwriting the new state. And the big figure, I think this idea of Irish independence, Irish freedom, is one which really unites that whole community. And the person at the vanguard of that is Father Peter York, a Galway native who became not only a champion of Irish freedom here, but also a Labour champion. And really, it's York who is this hugely dominating figure over that community, who brings them together and to support De Valera and support what he's trying to do. So as I said, I think, you know, when the more I look at here, the more I think there's just an incredible history of the Irish in California. And it's an old history. And over St. Patrick's Day, of course, we kind of bask in our heritage, and but it's also, for me, St. Patrick's Day is about celebrating the contemporary connections. I think that what's really interesting to me is just how vibrant and strong they are today. You know, we've over 2 million people in California identify as Irish American. California has played an outsized role in the economic transformation of Ireland. You know, the investments by Apple and Intel in the 1980s, 90s were transformational in the Irish economy and really laid the groundwork for what has become Ireland is now one of not just a European tech hub, but a global tech hub by virtue of the amount of data that we hold. 1/3 of all data in Europe is held in Ireland. You know, 45,000 jobs in Ireland come from West Coast companies, primarily from California. But it's not one-way traffic anymore. Now Irish companies are coming out here and creating jobs. 30,000 Californians across over 200 sites in this state are employed by Irish headquartered companies. So there really is a real vibrant two-way exchange in trade and investment. There's increasing research and academic exchanges. And we're seeing incredible numbers of people-to-people travel pre-pandemic. 250,000 Californians visited Ireland in 1919, 250,000, and 57,000 people from Ireland visited California. And that incredible people-to-people exchange also extends to obviously a local government level, where the sister cities are so strong. Dublin, San Jose, Cork, San Francisco, Limerick, Santa Clara, Galway, Menlo, Bray, Dublin, California, another town relationships between like Danville and New Ross. We're the only country, from what I can tell, in Europe that has our own caucus in the California State Assembly. All my other European colleagues look at me in awe when I say I'm going to speak to my Irish caucus members. They're like, what's that all about? But it speaks to the incredible affinity and the connections that we have. From the Irish government perspective, we're not resting on our laurels. We're getting ready for the next stage in Ireland's relationship with California. Since I've arrived here since 2017. And over the last number of years, we've opened a new Consulate General in Los Angeles in 2019 for our friends in Southern California. We've opened a new Screen Ireland office, that's the film promotion agency, that all stayed in Los Angeles last year. We're opening a new Tourism Ireland office in San Francisco in a couple of months' time. And the consulate here since 1933, one of the oldest Irish diplomatic missions anywhere in the world, is here in California. And we have moved to a brand new purpose-built Ireland House San Francisco at the very heart of the city of San Francisco. An enormous investment in our relationship here, an enormous vote of confidence in what we believe we can do in collaboration with California into the future. So this is the last year of my posting here. This is the last. Sorry, apologies if I sound a bit valedictory, but it's my last year here. But I'm enormously proud of the work that we have done. But I'm enormously optimistic of what we can do between Ireland and California, the west coast of Europe and the west coast of America, and the potential that we have to even do more in the future. But also believing that we've done a lot already. So, enjoy the presentations tonight, and I look forward to hearing them. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Robert, for this presentation. I really appreciate it. And now we have Tom Mchenry.
Geez, I usually follow somebody not quite as eloquent and precise as the Consul General. That was really a wonderful synopsis of the Irish in California. Really so well done. It maybe touches a few things that I'll talk about later, but also what you said about Ukraine. You know, the minute you say that word, you can't get it off your mind. But you know, who better, Consul General and panel would know more about the dangers and terror at times of being close to a overpowering nation that really doesn't give a damn about what they do there. Certainly we have that history. So congratulations to the EU for what they're doing, and Consul General, really wonderful, very, very good. I'm
So shall I introduce you, Tom?
But somebody start questioning me, and I will.
I intend to introduce you first.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so this is Tony. Tom Mchenry is an author, a playwright, a teacher, and a former mayor of San Jose. He's the founder of the Irish Innovation Center and a co-founder of Jose-Dublin Sister Cities Program. Tom's family has 4 generations of making important history-making contributions in San Jose, from his grandfather to his father. I'm going to cut this short and let you go ahead and tell us a little bit about how the San Jose-Dublin Sister Cities Program came to be created, Tom.
Okay, thank you, Tim. You could have gone on for much time. That would have been okay with me. But you know, the sister city, we have a lot of sister cities in San Jose, like most American cities do. And most of them, I think it's fair to say, were founded with the best of intentions, but kind of go dormant once the original people involved pass on in non-fatal terms. But in our sister city relationship has a long and distinguished pedigree, and it's still going strong thanks to some people here tonight, and thanks to the commitment that the Consul General alluded to about people in this area having a tremendous interest and involvement. It started with a lot of governmental work, and it came together with a lot of Irish luck, not so much the governmental work, including by me. It was going nowhere because Dublin is only twinned with, as I was told several times there in the 80s, we're only twinned with the capitals of Europe. And San Jose is not one of those, as we all know. And it's also a city that really has only been recognized as a place changing the entire world, including their contributions, fair play, to returning them to Ireland. So the way it happened in the luck is that all my work was going nowhere, and then I explained that to Tim Pat Coogan, the noted historian and a pretty influential guy, and he said, "I'll call Charlie." And I said, "What's he own a pub, or who are you talking about?" And he said, "No, I'll call Charlie Haughey up." And he made a call, and within about 24 hours, because I was only there 3 or 4 days, I was talking to the proper people and talking to Haughey himself. And lo and behold, we all know the history of that distinguished former Taoiseach, and the Sister City Committee was moved to the Dublin Council for a decision. And we gave as much information as we could, but somehow the council, I think there's 30 people on the Dublin Council, which being mayor for 8 years with a council of 8, I would say a council of 30 would be enough to serve about 6 months as mayor and then step off. So they had a debate. And unfortunately, the opponents were a lot more eloquent, if not precise, than the proponents, until someone they also pulled out, I have to say, a encyclopedia, which was a bit dated with the great literary history in Dublin. You think it wouldn't be a 1930 encyclopedia, but it was, that described San Jose as a great fruit and produce area. Apparently the Silicon Valley information had not gotten to the Dublin Council. It was going down in flaming defeat until somebody pulled a more recent article and started showing pictures of San Jose in California. And then someone said, well, we'll have to go to California and visit. Momentum switched immediately when the junket was proposed, and it was passed unanimously. So following that, we established an IDA headquarters as far as providing the place for it. And I was pleased to be able to go to the groundbreaking or sod turning of Intel there. And the rest, as they say, is history. The Irish contributed much to our area, continue to, and I think we provided a little bit back. So that's the history of the program, and it's been carried forward by Tim and Tony and Celia and other people here. So keep up the good work, as I do very little of it right now.
Well, thank you, Tom. And before you go, I understand that you are presently preparing an Irish-themed play called The Statue for Ballybunion, which premiered in Dublin in 2017, and you're going to be showing it for a U.S. premiere here in San Jose in September. What is it about?
It's about the placement of a statue in Ballybunion of William Jefferson Clinton. It's all true. And it's going to be on in downtown San Jose. It premiered at the O'Reilly Theater in Dublin. Thank you for mentioning that. Having my play premiere in Dublin, it would be a little bit like I told you, I'm playing on the American basketball team in the Olympics next time around. So I was thrilled by that, but it'll be here in San Jose, and maybe the Consul General and a few of you can come to it. It's in September. That's the plug there.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both very much. And now we have Tim Quigley.
So thank you, Tiffany. And Tom may not remember this, but I actually, the first time I met Tom Mchenry was in an automobile during an appreciation event following the Loma Prieta earthquake. I was base commander at Moffett Field, and the city of San Jose invited me on behalf of the soldiers and sailors at Moffett Field to participate in this appreciation event put on by the city of San Jose some number of months after we had recovered, or at least done the initial recovery of Loma Prieta. But during that sedan ride together, you mused about my name and said, well, we've got a sister city relationship with San Jose, Dublin. And so that the rest is history. And that's when I left the Navy some 4 or 5 years later, one of the first things I looked for was this relationship to affiliate with in a volunteer capacity. So I want to thank you for that publicly. And it's a little bit of our history and how things hand from one individual to another in this wonderful experiment that we have known as citizen diplomacy between communities. I think another element to start off with is that many of us don't realize that when President Eisenhower initiated the people-to-people concept at his White House summit on citizen diplomacy in 1956, San Jose was one of the first 35 signatures to the establishment of that process. And we have a very long pedigree of leaders that have been committed to the concept of these links as not only a cultural and a heritage connection, but a business, academic, and community connection. And you know, one of our more notable forebears is then Mayor Norm Mineta has been a central in the Sister City movement nationally. He is totally revered as one of our founders of that movement. So you can see that San Jose has a long heritage in citizen diplomacy. And as Tom said, one of the thoroughbreds of our contribution to that has always been the San Jose-Dublin Sister City relationship. I would note that as I commented on a couple of things, arts, culture and heritage, academic and scholarship, economic development and business development, emergency preparedness and disaster response and community resiliency, and exchanges of all sorts, municipal, academic, sports, youth. Those are all the things that a relationship does, but typically a community will touch on all aspects of those connections between communities, but focus on one or two or three. And I would say that looking back from Tom's heritage, he started an exchange process that really, if we look back, those early delegations were very thoughtfully made up of community leaders from across sections, but with a heavy dose of business. And when we look at the names, you know, Amdahl, Seagate, Intel twice was very, two generations of Intel have been involved. Cypress Semiconductor has been seminal for our work in the 2010 to 2020 timeframe. Xilinx is another company. Many of those companies engaged by just participating on our annual delegation exchanges. You know, for us, as local citizens, we were always looking forward to the Lord Mayor and his delegation visit, which we tended to align Irish Week with. And that was our major delivery to the city in our agreement with the city each year, is that we would put on Irish Week, and then our signature activity at the end of that, not initially, but eventually it became tied to the Irish Week. Part of it was the Spirit of Ireland award. And so Irish Week and signature, the Spirit of Ireland award became our products, our delivery to the community to showcase Irishness in San Jose, coupled with this constant thread of introducing business, Silicon Valley, to Ireland during a period that really helped launch the Celtic Tiger of the mid to late 90s. That certainly took Ireland from a place that it had very little economic robustness to a very healthy economy, and in good measure, it was really those early engagements that started that custom, if you will, of making those introductions that helped stimulate that economic awakening for Ireland. And what did we get in return? Well, a number of years ago, Pam Kelly is on here. I think Tony and a few others, maybe even Kathleen was at the session, but I can recall in I think it was 2013, the delegation was in town, and we always scheduled with one of the high-tech companies. It was always one of the high points of the exchange, and we scheduled it with Cypress Semiconductor, and this flamboyant fella came bounding in to the room, TJ Rogers, if any of you are familiar with him, and he just took it away and talked, I think, about an hour and a half nonstop. But in that, he explained one of the bursts of Cypress Semiconductor's early years was he was so proud of this particular engineer. Cahal Phelan was his name. And finally, one day he called Cahal into his office and he said, you know, I wish I had 10 of you. And Cahal turned to him and said, give me a week and I'll bring you 10. And what did he do? He went back to Dublin, to Trinity, University College Dublin, and then the nascent Dublin City University, and came back a week later with, or some metaphorically, a short time later with 10 engineers. TJ's message to us was that what we got in the exchange was that we got this incredible wealth of intellect and skill set that while they needed help lifting their economy, we needed that infusion of energy and creativity that helped. And he said, there has always been a majority of Irish engineers in my research and development division. I thought that was a very insightful example of the tangible benefits of what Tom Mchenry and his team had spawned by launching this relationship so many years before. We've got a couple of other things I like to just anecdotes just to share. It may seem pedantic, but municipal exchanges, Eisenhower's vision was exchanges. If people meet people and they exchange ideas, it just deepens that connection locally between them, but it also helps build and lift the quality of life and the economic vitality of a community. And I would note that a number of years ago in one of our exchanges, we were fascinated because the Dublin had just been awarded the EU award for the best policy on plastic bags. So what did we do? Being good Californians, we got a hold of that copy of that instruction or that ordinance that the city had, brought it back to San Jose, and we adopted it word for word. And that's the value of a municipal exchange. Another one, and several years later, we had then council member Sam Liccardo with us, and he was fascinated with the bike lanes and the public bike process of Dublin. And sure enough, a couple of years later, we took that idea, brought it back to city management, and that percolated its way up. And all you have to do is look around the city and you'll see a lot of physical evidence of the value of that relationship. And I would say in return, when you visit Dublin now, that light rail system that they have, that it took years in disrupting those ancient historical streets, which runs now so well, that came from California engineers that helped the city brought on for the development of that process. So you can see the mutual benefit that these types of relationships really do provide both communities, but more importantly, it touches the lives of the folks, and it's those people-to-people connections that have really enriched our community, I know, because of this relationship and what Tom and his colleagues started so many years ago. At our 25-year mark, so the Spirit of Ireland actually is very well known. When you talk about the Spirit of Ireland, it's one of the signature things that showcases San Jose. In all my work around the country, when I go to, as Robert was talking about, when I visit others of the 107 Irish sister cities that we have in the country, they all, almost to one, I'll get asked about the Spirit of Ireland. Could I share with them how we have done that so that they could develop a similar type of connective award system that acknowledges contributions between colleagues on both sides of the equation.
Thank you very much, Tim. Unfortunately, we do have to proceed. We do have a tight schedule, unfortunately, but thank you so much for all of your benefits. Did you want to give a last statement?
I just want to say the San Jose Shamrock Run is coming up not this weekend, but next weekend. So make sure you sign up for it.
Thank you so much again. I appreciate it. And now we have Jennifer Drennan.
Tiffany, thank you so much. So I'm Jennifer Drennan, and Tiffany, let's start with the video from Kathleen Dowling McDonough because my intro is part of that recording.
Absolutely. Okay. And just bear with me while I connect the audio. I just remembered I need to share audio.
So while we're doing that, Kathleen Dowling McDonough is one of the daughters of our library's founder, Patrick J. Dowling. And of course, the library bears his name. And I have to hand a couple of books related to some of the gentlemen that Robert O'Driscoll, our consul, was speaking about earlier. She prepared a video about her father, his immigration story, and how he came to write about Irish Californians.
And Jennifer, if you could just give me a thumbs up as I start playing to make sure we can hear it, I appreciate it.
Okay. Welcome. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I am Jennifer Drennan, the librarian for the Patrick J. Dowling Library located in the United Irish Cultural Center of San Francisco. And we were fortunate to have with us today.
Oh, my apologies. I was just trying to make this larger.
Okay. Welcome. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I am Jennifer Drennan, the librarian for the Patrick J. Dowling Library located in the United Irish Cultural Center of San Francisco. And we were fortunate to have with us today Kathleen Dowling McDonough, one of Patrick Dowling's daughters, and she will speak to his experience as an Irish immigrant to California and a little of his background. And Kathleen, I know your dad also wrote 2 books on Irish California after he founded the library here in the center. So if you could please tell us about your dad and how he came to write these books, that would be grand. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And we're getting close to St. Patrick's Day. So happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody, our favorite time of the year. Well, first and foremost, my dad loved being Irish. And I'm so glad we're taping this at this time of the year because March was the month that we owned. I mean, we start getting excited mid-February and we're at events like this all throughout March, and we have been our entire lives just celebrating our Irishness and our heritage. So I'm very excited to be here today and to talk a little bit about my dad. So he loved being Irish, but he also loved being American. He was born in County Laois, which is in the middle of Ireland, in 1904. So if he was alive today, he'd be 118 years old, which is hard to believe. He came to San Francisco in 1926, and he was, like most, looking for opportunity. And he did find work here, which was great. Work was not available in Ireland at that time. And so finding work was the first step to his future here in San Francisco. And he had a lot of different jobs and he had some success. He ended up having a very big family and he had an amazing life here in San Francisco that he was always grateful for. He always loved Ireland, but he loved America because America gave him this amazing opportunity. He did miss Ireland, and I think like many of the immigrants do, and he was very instrumental back then in helping to create this amazing Irish community that is still going strong today. So he was a very big part of that. And when he was living his life in San Francisco, he noticed everywhere he looked, there were Irish names and Irish places that he fell in love with and was so influenced by, and realized the people that came before him had done so much to shape San Francisco into what it was. So I'm going to give you a few quick examples that are ones that we heard about a lot growing up. If you can imagine, this would be dinner table conversation at our house. We live kind of near a little tiny park over the sunset called McCoppin Square, and that was named after the first foreign-born mayor of San Francisco ever. And that foreign-born mayor happened to be Frank McCoppin, who was born in County Longford, Ireland. So we're also close to O'Shaughnessy Boulevard right over here, which was named after Michael O'Shaughnessy, who was a civil engineer who came to San Francisco and became the first engineer of the city, official engineer, and he developed Hetch Hetchy, which is our amazing water system. And he came from County Limerick. And any native San Franciscan, when we go out to a restaurant and they say still or sparkling, we say, we'll have Hetch Hetchy. And we owe all of that and our amazing drinking water here to Michael O'Shaughnessy. Down by the ballpark here where the Giants play, Oracle Park, we drive over Lefty O'Doul Bridge. And Lefty O'Doul Bridge was named after a very legendary baseball player in San Francisco of Irish descent. And then down in Union Square, we walk along O'Farrell Street, and that was named after Jasper O'Farrell, who came here from County Wexford. He was the first official surveyor ever of San Francisco, and he designed the Grand Promenade, which is today Market Street. So these were Irish people you could not escape. They were there everywhere. And my dad saw these names of his brothers and sisters coming from Ireland, and he loved all the stories. And those were just a very, very few. There are so many more. So he was surrounded by all of these people, and he was fascinated and did a lot of old-fashioned research and investigated to find out who these people were. And it was not well known at the time who these people were or where these names came from. And so he looked into that, and he wanted the whole world to know. And so in 1984, when he was 80 years old, and this is for all of us old people, there's hope. He was 80 years old. He took his first college course. He took a writing class at San Francisco State, and he bought a computer. I mean, like a huge computer from 1984 with no internet connection. And he wrote his first book, which he published 4 years later when he was 84 years old in 1988. So this was all pre-internet, if you can imagine. His research took forever. So if he has so many pictures in his books, he would send a letter to someone, ask for a picture. They'd get back to him a month later. They'd send him a picture a month later. And so the research was old-fashioned, hard research, not like what we have at the tip of our fingers today at all. So he worked so hard on all of this. And a lot of it he started, but didn't finish in time for his first book. And the second book was all of the other stories he didn't get to tell. And I know he probably had a third and fourth book in him there as well. So I am particularly happy to be doing this today for San Jose Public Library, because libraries were his #1 resource. We have 2 local libraries right near us in San Francisco, the Merced branch and the Sutro branch. And my dad literally had his own desk at those libraries. I mean, we had the librarians over for dinner. We gave the librarians Christmas presents. The libraries and librarians were a very big part of our life and his life. And he also took Bart over to UC Berkeley because they have a lot of special resources over there that weren't available in our local San Francisco branches. So we love libraries. In 1988, when he was, or no, 98, when he was 94 years old, he published his second book. And writing these books was basically a lifestyle twist for my dad. It was his life, was investigating and being proud of who these Irish people were. And that's how these books came to be. There were characters that he met through his research that he wanted to tell all of us about.
Yeah. Were there any particularly in San Jose that struck him that he included as he was writing the Irish Californians?
Yes. Well, first it started with San Francisco because they were so obvious. And then his research grew to the state of California, and there were quite a few in the area of San Jose. And I'm going to give you a few teasers about some really cool characters in San Jose that you might want to read about yourself. In my dad's first book right here, this is California, The Irish Dream. He wrote about a character by the name of Mike Catalan. I said Catalan. My sister said, no, I think it's Catalan. I think it's Catalan. So he, I'm sorry, Michael, it's Mike Catalan. So he came from County Tipperary. Here's a picture of Mike in the early 1800s. Now you would assume anyone coming from County Tipperary in the early 1800s was looking for opportunity because that's what most people were doing. No, not Michael Catalan. He was on the run. He was a defender of Robert Emmet, and he was running for his life. His life was not safe. he was escaping the English and came over to America to find not a better life, to keep his life. So that's why he came here. And he ended up having a lot of success in San Jose. He was called San Jose's pioneer farmer. And, you know, we farmers, I mean, we Irish, we're farmers. We have green thumbs. We've been doing this for centuries. He was successful as a farmer. He mostly grew wheat, which was very needed at the time. And he had some dairy as well. But this book, and this chapter in particular in this book, I love because my dad was able to meet some of the ancestors of Mike. He met, and my dad actually calls him Old Mike in the book, because by the time you get halfway through this chapter, he's got like 7 kids and grandkids and everything. So he's Old Mike by the mid chapter. So he met the great grandson of Old Mike, who's Edward Catalan's Stephanie. And Edward provided my dad with amazing documents. And what I love the most is not only documents, letters that Mike wrote and letters that Mike received. So these were primary sources, firsthand account of what was going on at the time. And my dad inferred so much out of these letters with little sentences. One sentence in one letter led my father to find out his path when he ran from home to get to America, like exactly what bridge he went to, exactly what river he went to. And so it's really interesting. But most of the letters were to his sons and from his sons. So, and my dad said at one point that no doubt he was quite pleased by his family's success, which he was, but you could feel the sadness in the letters that his sons were so spread out. So that was the sad part about those times. People came over from Ireland. They never usually made it back to see their family again. And when Mike came over, he had a big family, but looking for opportunity, the kids spread out. So he was longing like most Irish immigrants are. But they're really beautifully written. And there's a letter to Mike's one son that's local, one that's far away. And then there's a letter that Mike's brother wrote to him from Ireland because his brother missed him and never saw him again and stayed in touch with him. So I loved this chapter, and I would recommend, it's chapter 8 on Michael Catalan. Take out this book. It's at the San Jose Public Library, and read chapter 8 if you have time. In my dad's second book right here, this is Irish Californians. And in this book, he wrote about a character named Miles Poor O'Connor. And Miles came from absolute poverty. He was born in County Laois in 1823. And as you know, my dad was born in County Laois, so that might be part of the reason this guy got this big chapter in the book. So a little favoritism there. When he came to America, he was looking for opportunity. And he had a couple of relatives in St. Louis, Missouri, and that's where he went first. And he was a very intelligent young man. And one of his relatives, who was somewhat successful, recognized this and decided that he was going to pay for Miles to go through law school. So Miles went through law school and was a success there. And then the gold rush happened. And like everyone, he wanted to come to California, but he did not want to come to California for gold. He wanted to be the lawyer for all these new wealthy individuals who found gold. And guess what? He ends up striking gold. So talk about the luck of the Irish there. He got very lucky accidentally striking gold. And I'm going to go back to Mike in a second, but just a little side note here in this chapter, there's a whole section about the overland wagon train that he came on from St. Louis to California. And my dad goes into the details about what he ate, what he saw along the way. And it's just, that in itself is worth reading this chapter because that is just so interesting. But okay, back to Mike. So Mike became very, very wealthy. He got into politics like we know a lot of Irish people do, and he eventually became a senator. So that's pretty amazing. But mostly with his wealth, he became a philanthropist. And, you know, we all give back to the community now. It wasn't a common practice back then, and he became a very big philanthropist in San Jose. And I wanted to talk about Miles today because he founded and financed the O'Connor Hospital, which still is standing and very busy in San Jose today. And I went on the O'Connor Hospital website just to say hi to Miles. guess what? He's not mentioned on there at all. So I'm letting you all know it was Miles O'Connor who founded the O'Connor Hospital. So one of the things I really liked about this chapter is, and I remember reading this 20 years ago, my dad mentions the 1918 flu epidemic. And I was like, epidemic, you know, what's an epidemic? Okay, well, sorry, Dad. I know what an epidemic is now. But so at this time, San Jose and the vicinity were hit very hard. Over 200 cases and 7 deaths in a single 24-hour period. Worse yet, there were very few doctors on hand to care for the sick, with the vast majority caring for the troops and over in Europe. But the amazing thing about O'Connor Hospital is it had a nursing school within it. And so O'Connor Hospital had put out so many amazing nurses who were still in San Jose that San Jose was effectively able to handle the Spanish flu a lot better than a lot of areas did. So that was a really fun thing to read about in this chapter. And so read that chapter in this book, also available at the San Jose Public Library. And, but really, I think probably for all of everybody down in San Jose, the most well-known person is probably Martin Murphy. And I know, Jen, he's one of your favorites. So you'll be talking about him soon. So everybody, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope that you are interested in some of these characters like we are and my dad was. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Kathleen.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. And you had another part you wanted to talk about quickly?
Well, yes, quickly, and we can move on to the next slide because I don't want to look at my glasses that much longer. So what I did was, following up with that, I had read about Martin Murphy, and that's what started the conversation with Kathleen, and would she speak tonight about her dad. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Sorry. Mm-hmm.
Oh, good. No, that's okay. I've been having some connection issues, so I wasn't sure. So what you're seeing on this slide is a collection of some of the Dowling Library in the UICC in San Francisco, some of our local newspapers from the 1800s, early 1900s, and a picture of the library itself, the covers of Pat Dowling's 2 books. The top row is Martin Murphy Jr. and a picture looking northbound on South Murphy Avenue in Sunnyvale in 1901, I hope. Well, the caption will remember better than I do. And then also a sketch of the Murphy home provided by the California State Parks Association. An illustration from the anniversary party that the Murphys threw when Martin Murphy Jr. and his wife Mary celebrated their 50th, their golden wedding anniversary. And some people on tonight might actually have heard of that party. It was one of the biggest thrown ever in the state of California, 50,000 guests. It started in true fiesta fashion on July 18th, 1881. He invited basically as much of California as he could by placing the notice in the San Jose Mercury News. And the Murphy family, like so many other Irish, left Ireland. Actually, in their case, they left in 1820 and went to Canada first. They were fleeing the repercussions of the 1798 rebellion, the Act of Union of 1800, and the penal laws, which denied them access to education and participation in civic life because they retained their Catholic faith. So education and access to opportunity was incredibly important to them. Like so many, they ended up here in California. They were the first party to successfully cross the Sierras at what would later be known as Donner Pass in 1844. Their scouting party ended up caught up in the Spanish California Civil War, but out of that came a promise of aid for having aided Castro in his success, and the ability to acquire land as if they were Mexican citizens, because California in 1844 was not yet part of the US. So with that, they, over the years, acquired 78,800 acres stretching from Sacramento to San Francisco through the Santa Clara Valley on down to San Luis Obispo. And at one point, you could, not in a straight line, ride from Santa Clara Valley to San Luis Obispo and never leave Murphy property. With all this, though, one of his major contributions to the area is in 1851, he partnered with Bishop Alemany, and he was one of the major instigators of founding Santa Clara University. He also founded the Notre Dame Academy for Girls, which is now known as the College of Notre Dame. Not surprisingly, his children attended both schools. The first school in Sacramento County was actually founded on the Murphy farm and taught by Patrick O'Brien, who had been an itinerant teacher in the tradition of the Catholic hedge schools in Ireland. So I think what struck me about him has struck me about so many of the Irish Californians that I've read about and come across as a custodian of the Dowling collection, that they are incredibly generous, education and community driven. And so with Martin Murphy and his descendants, who played a very active role in California, especially the Santa Clara Valley, others of their firsts included, they were the first to import American cattle and Norman horses. They built the first frame horse in Santa Clara County, planted the first orchards when they realized that their wheat fields were no longer the best use of their lands. So they were responsible for some of the orchards being brought in. The first brick buildings in San Jose were the Murphy buildings. And one of them, built in 1860, was used for commerce as the courthouse and as the post office. And he also granted right-of-way to the San Francisco-San Jose Railroad to come through his ranch along the bay to bring goods, services, and people from San Francisco down into San Jose. There's a wonderful local resource, the Heritage Park Museum in Sunnyvale. The museum building is based on the Murphy House, which was actually occupied by the Murphy family until 1953. The city of Sunnyvale acquired it and the land for public use. But tragically, in the middle of the night, the house was bulldozed to make way for the Central Expressway. But the museum is there now, and they hold items from the Murphy collection and a lot about the development of the Santa Clara Valley and how it has evolved over the years, from wheat fields to orchards to vineyards to Silicon Valley and a seat of aviation that we know now. Now, the Dowling Library is open on weekends still. We're a research library. Pat founded it entirely on donations. He traveled, in addition to writing the books, he before he settled down to do that, he traveled the length and breadth of Ireland and across the US, soliciting materials. We focus our collecting now mostly on Irish Americans and Irish history as it relates to the West Coast, but we have over 6,000 titles. The Consul has been very generous, and a large number of our recent donations have come through their office. We hold ephemera and artifacts from families and communities, Irish organizations from the last 170 years in the area. And in the last 2 years, we've been focusing on digitizing a lot of the collection, doing more public outreach, and furthering our presence in social media to make the collection more accessible than just the 3 days a week, 3 afternoons a week that we were historically open. Upcoming programming includes artist Annie Holland and her sister Kathleen, who will be exhibiting in person, opening on March 10th here at the United Irish Cultural Center, bringing her exhibition on the children of the Free State, interviewing people who were born as the Republic of Ireland was founded in 1921. Kathleen is a talented jeweler, incorporating industrial and natural elements to her art. We will be partnering with the Heritage Park Museum in September for their walkthrough time. And in the meanwhile, are also working with a couple of Irish-born authors and the Irish Veterans Association to bring additional programming through the library and the cultural center here. So thank you. I appreciate your invitation to speak tonight.
Jennifer, really appreciate it. And now we have Tony and Celia from AmeriCeltic.
All right, go, Celia.
Okay. My name is Cecilia Fabosh-Becker. My husband is Anthony Becker. We run AmeriCeltic, which is a digital weekly newsletter, a Facebook page, website, and so forth. It's on all the time, free to everybody, all the time. I graduated with degrees in history and anthropology from the University of Minnesota, did a master's program as an undergraduate, so I'm the one that does most of the history and prehistory writing, and because of my political activism for some 50 years, I guess now, I do some of the editorials as well. So if you didn't like the editorial, I'm the one you blame. Now, we tried to cover 200 years, I'm not joking, 200 years of Irish and other Celts in California in a nice little presentation. It's not possible to do that in 15 minutes. So we ended up creating another web page on our site, on our website, and we're going to be taking you through sections of this.
I apologize, Celia. We're having a hard time hearing you right now. Are you able to bring the microphone closer? I apologize a lot.
Come on, Anthony.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to have a little problem with this because, okay, the microphone is drooping. Okay, I'm going to try leaning forward here, and hopefully I can still read the things we're going through. As I started to say, that we ended up, after researching 200 years of Irish and Celtic history, creating another web page for our website, and we're going to take you through the high points of it, and for the detail, please check the website. There are films there are pictures. There's much more detail than what we're going to cover in 15 minutes. Okay, we're going to start real briefly with the Scots and Irish and Scots, Irish, and Alta California. They've been coming to California since the very early 1800s. Some of the first ones were jumping ship in Monterey and San Pedro. One particular one who was fleeing the English depredations and taking away lands in Scotland was a James Cameron, and he jumped ship in Monterey in 1814. Went over the hills, founded the town of Gilroy, and adopted the name Gilroy from his mother's family. He was fleeing the Highland clearances. He would be one of the first of many Irish and Scots who were fleeing the poverty and the taking of lands in Scotland and Ireland. Okay, and we have a nice little article about him. The current mayor of San Jose, Sam Liccardo, is a direct descendant of Cameron. He's also a descendant of the Murphy family that was discussed earlier. Okay, after the 1821, the brand new government of Mexico had a problem. Alta California was slow growing, ranching and agriculture, and meats and so forth, which were supplying a lot of the ships that came from Asia to Europe and stopped here for supplies and such. But he had a population problem, and the United States was heading west. By the 1830s, he called upon Father McNamara to bring in a whole lot, 3,000 Irish families. The Mexicans brought in, let's try this again. Father McNamara was charged with bringing in 3,000 families and given grants in the San Joaquin Valley to do this. Unfortunately, about the same time he started doing this, there came this rogue captain in charge of an expedition named Fremont. And there were some issues with that, and Father McNamara unfortunately died before he could complete the project. You know about Murphy, I won't go over that again, but you may not know that virtually all of the Murphys in California that have come here since all came from County Wexford, Ireland, and that includes the Murphys who founded the town of Murphy in the Gold Rush country. A lot of Murphys, which may explain some of the luck we have around here sometimes. Okay. So the Irish were particularly welcomed by the Spanish and Mexicans because they were Catholic. They figured they would have far fewer problems with them than they would the Protestant Scots and Scots-Irish. But the interesting thing is when it became critical for people to remember their roots when Ireland was fighting for its freedom, both stood side by side because they all remembered what had happened to them in Scotland and Ireland and in the American Revolution. And I will get to that in a minute. Now, the next part we're going to go to is how San Jose developed. A lot of people remember the Valley of Heart's Delight, the Valley of the Heart's Delight. And since 1980, technology companies have brought a lot of wealth to the South Bay area, Silicon Valley, and to Ireland. But this was not the first time that San Jose and Santa Clara Valley brought significant support to Ireland. The Irish in San Jose and Santa Clara County had significant impact both here in Ireland long before. We like to think of San Francisco as being the largest and wealthiest city with the most Irish on the West Coast, and always. But between about 1820 and 1930, this was only partly correct. Yes, San Francisco was the largest city, but the wealthiest city was actually San Jose. And there was a very big reason for it. The wealthiest mine in the entire state of California was in San Jose. It was the New Albertan Quicksilver mine. It began with the Spanish in the 1820s, was reincorporated in 1845 under Mexican rule, and until the end of World War II, it refined, the mercury produced in this mine refined almost all of the gold in North America, and literally paid for not just World War I and World War II, but also a lot of many good causes, including Irish freedom. Over 1 million flasks of mercury, and a flask weighed 75 pounds, were produced per year from this mine from 1854 on. It was the biggest mercury mine in North America. It was named for the Albertan mine in Spain, which was one of the biggest mines in Spain, which had been refining European gold for centuries. Okay. And there were 3,000 miners. Some of them were Irish. Most of them were Cornish, Mexican, Spanish, and even a little bit English, but there were some Irish. But there were also a lot of Irish-owned shops in the area and in San Jose that supplied the miners, supplied them food, supplied them tools, and so forth, and transported that mercury that was being produced, and so forth. So the Irish had a strong connection to this. Were all good jobs connected to this huge, huge mine. Okay, I'm going to go forward from that a little bit. And in addition to that, the San Jose had 3 copper mines, which later on helped provide copper wire for the electric power and telephone systems for many of the Bay Area cities. And by the late 1800s, a large amount of food being consumed in San Francisco was coming from the large and fertile farms of Santa Clara Valley, and were being taken on that railroad north that Murphy allowed to pass through north to San Francisco. I interviewed an old-timer in San Jose, Hal Pearsall, in the 1960s, who was in his 80s when I met him, and he described how there were thriving fisheries, docks, and cultivation and harvesting of oysters, clams, shrimp, and crabs all around El Viso that were literally being sent by rail to San Francisco for the restaurants. So there was a lot of production of things that San Francisco needed here. It meant the city grew wealthy on these things, as mining and the agriculture. Okay, now many of you have watched the film California Easter Rising, created for the 100th anniversary of the event by videographer Donna McCowan and premiered on March 17, 2016 here in San Jose. It was partly funded and nearly unanimously supported by the local Irish community here in the Bay Area, in particular in San Francisco and the South Bay, Santa Clara County. He covered a number of issues: Thomas Desmond, the Ancient Order of Hibernians, which was much more significant than people realized, Father Peter York, James D. Phelan, the senator you heard mentioned, and then a couple of things you've never heard about: Michael Griffith, the San Jose lawyer and the AO, who became the California AOH treasurer and secretary for several years, just immediately prior to the rising. And then the Friends of Irish Freedom, which were founded in 1916 specifically to support independence for Ireland and to save all the funds that had been going through the Ancient Order of Hibernians for the charitable causes. President Woodrow Wilson threatened to confiscate all of the funds that were being raised by the AOH at the behest of the British, because the funds were going to both revolution and to charity. So the answer was in 1915 was that to create a separate organization, which was then incorporated in March of 1916. It was started by John Byrne out of Los Angeles and New York. The John Byrne collection describing the founding and the many records of this organization are now at the San Jose State University Library. John Byrne and Friends of Irish Freedom collection in special collections there for anyone who wants to take a look at those. Okay, the Ancient Order of Hibernians was the leading fundraiser for the cause of Irish freedom, and it had its offices in, you recognize this, the Hibernia Bank building directly across the street from the Cathedral Basilica of St. Joseph. And who founded that? An Irishman out of San Francisco who had the good sense to put a bank building in San Jose. He wasn't the first. There was also Donahue and Kelly, who made a fortune mining the miners, as we say, selling goods to the miners, selling the tools, selling the food they needed, and so forth. And they founded the bank Donahue Kelly, which had 3 notable offices that we found for sure. There may have been others. The first one was in San Francisco. The second one was in San Jose. The third one was in New York, not terribly far from a man named Devoy. And he had international licenses to send money from San Jose, San Francisco, through New York to Ireland. Let you think, and this was this was well before 1916, all the way up to 1916 and later. I'll let you think about that. The other one that was founded was by James Phelan. It was the first National Bank of San Francisco, and the second branch he started was right here in San Jose. He came down. This is James Phelan, the father. The son was then given responsibility for managing the bank in San Jose before he became senator, and he, eventually bought property in Saratoga, and came to live in the San Jose area. Died here. Villa Montalvo was then given eventually to the county and has become a performing arts center. So if you've ever been there, this was again another Irishman who created this. I'm skipping a few things, but I'm trying to get through here and keep on time. Okay, so there was the AOH, the Ancient Order of Hibernians, as Tom Mchenry says in his talk on Mick McDonald, was not the nice group of people who throw St. Patrick's Day parades later. Okay, in San Francisco in the early 1900s, the British had become very concerned about the proclivities of the Irish and had stationed 150 agents there that became the direct antecedents of SIS, which include basically MI5 and MI6. It was very hard to maneuver around and do anything, as a man named Lawrence de Lacy discovered. Especially if you're a fair-haired Irishman and you're going to be meeting with people like Indian revolutionaries and talking about gun running. So he ended up imprisoned until 1919. It meant that with that many agents, it was hard for the Irish and the Ancient Order of Hibernians to do business in San Francisco, to raise funds, to manage them, to send them to Ireland. But the British paid little attention to San Jose. Oh, that little bitty city that's only about 30,000 miles to the south and mostly agriculture. Oh, yeah, who cares? They didn't know anything about mining. So I'm sorry, but they didn't. Tin mining maybe, but definitely not mercury mining. So the Irish were able to operate here more freely. And you had conventions for the Ancient Order of Hibernians, the statewide conventions that began to be held here in San Jose. The statewide treasurer and then secretary and then held other offices for over 10, for about 10 years, was Michael Griffith from San Jose. His parents had been some of those miners who struck it rich. His father, his uncle, had struck it rich in Trinity County. They came down here, helped support Santa Clara University, sent Michael to the university. He became a lawyer and then went to work for the AOH. At the same time this is starting to happen, another immigrant has come here. And that man was Patrick Henry McEnery, not McHenry, McEnery, a different one. Okay, he was brought here as a protege of Archbishop Reardon, and he'd been a journalist in Ireland and England with Fleet Street, and somehow very quickly he got made the editor of the San Jose Mercury Herald. And from then on, you could go to the San Jose Library and you could look at all the coverage now of Irish events as soon as Patrick Henry McEnery became editor. We found volumes of material. You could spend weeks there looking at this. Irish at this point began to understand that media coverage, fair, honest, and detailed, was very important to their cause. And I do think Patrick Henry McEnery had a lot of good to do with that. It's a shame he didn't live longer. This is Tom Mchenery's grandfather. Okay. Because of all this activity, we get to Michael Collins and Mick McDonald. And there is a beautiful video that we filmed at Mick McDonald's grave, which is in the Mission Santa Clara Cemetery, the adjunct cemetery that's right on the city line of San Jose and Santa Clara. And people had forgotten it was there, so we held a memorial to remind people of the significance of Mick McDonald to the revolution and the very dangerous, difficult, painful work he had to do to help, and the fact that it caused him a nervous breakdown and brought him to San Jose. It was the Ancient Order of Hibernians right here in San Jose that brought Mick McDonald, the leader of the 12 Apostles, the squad, here to San Jose. He worked for John McEnery, Tom Mchenery's father, and his office was in the building they held the Farmers Union that the McEnerys had come to own, another general store.
And it is now
O'Flaherty's pub. Okay, so if there was maybe a happy place that McDonald's ghost might be, maybe it's O'Flaherty's, and maybe he'll raise a pint. So we did a video, and it's narrated with a detailed story of Mick McDonald by Tom Mchenry, introduced by Sean O'Kane of the San Jose-Dublin Sister Cities. And I hope you will check the video out and see it if you haven't already. Okay. I'm bringing us really quickly forward now to after 1922, when we finally saw the Irish at least get dominion status. From 1922 on, there were a number of organizations that were founded. The Ancient Order of Hibernians settled down a bit and became that lovely group that threw St. Patrick's Day parades. Now, I want to tell you about some of those St. Patrick's Day parades, just a smidgen or two here. When I looked at the articles about them that were published in San Jose and San Francisco, when I was going through the microfilm reels, I was struck by the fact that there were so many Scottish organizations as well as Irish. There was a time when we all remembered our roots and our commonality, and that became more important than the difference of religion. And I hope that someday we'll see that again. I know that the San Francisco Caledonian Club is certainly trying to revive that with the festival that now includes Irish pavilions, Irish dancing, Irish music on Labor Day weekend. So I hope that some of you will someday check that out and see and enjoy it. After that, you had, I'm going to go past, let's see, I'm going to move forward. I've already mentioned Friends of Irish Freedom. There were many new organizations that formed. In 1945, the Irish Literary and Historical Society formed in 1945, the United Irish Cultural Center in 1973, and opened in 75, the Irish Social Club of Santa Clara County was founded in 1959, and it used to host some of the dinners with San Jose Dublin for a time, and has done some other events hosting the Irish coming here. Then there is of course, the San Jose Dublin Sister Cities Program, already described, and the Irish Technology Leadership Group and the Irish Innovation Center, all here, those two in San Jose. And this is where a lot of those business deals were struck that have now benefited Ireland in the 1980s and 90s. But there is another transition coming, as many Irish from San Jose have now moved further out in California to Monterey County and to the greater Sacramento area, like the Quain family that is related to the First Lady of Ireland. Her family now lives in Sacramento, but they started out in San Francisco in Marin County. Because some of them are still in Marin County, but there's a bunch that's now in Sacramento.
And they run?
And they run I think it's the Delta King, right?
The Delta King.
King.
In Old Town
In Old Town Sacramento. It is a hotel, restaurant, pub, and a lot of fun, if you ever get there. So we are now in transition. We have to develop new generations that remember the past. We have to pass the torch. And that's where we're at right now. All of the organizations are in flux, trying to attract new members, younger members, trying to find new messages to spread and share. And that concludes my presentation. And there's a lot more on the website. Please see the URL for those who want more details.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to sincerely thank you both. I know that it was a time crunch to try to fit this all in, so I really appreciate it. And all of our guest speakers, thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me in the San Jose Public Library. Please take a few minutes to fill out our program survey. For a complete list of other virtual programs, please visit sjpl.org/virtual programs. Also, don't forget to follow us at San Jose Library on Facebook and sign up for their newsletter at sjpl.org/e-newsletter to stay informed of all things SJPL. Have a great day.